Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the program agenda. I'm your host, Cito Beltran. On this Monday, if I'm not mistaken, it is supposed to be a Monday, January 13th. And I'm making the emphasis on Monday because my Código says Thursday. Be careful. Do not trust your códigos. Do not trust your script because sometimes, spell check, spell correct, etc., and date correct can get you into a lot of trouble. But anyway, it's a Monday. Let's be cheerful about life. And today, please join us this morning because I'm going to have once again, he's a repeat the guest here. Actually, he's no longer a guest. We'd rather have him as a regular, contributor to the betterment of the program and the audience. We're going to speak again to Paulo Alcazaren, the respected urban planner, because we really need to discuss urban planning. Many of you might think it's magic, it's voodoo, it's wishful thinking. But if you live in places where you cannot even figure out what the rules are or where the rules contradict each other or itself, then urban planning may be the only solution we have out of the mess that we're in. But I'm getting ahead of ourselves. Please join us today because we are going to have a very interesting conversation. And for those of you who are considering a future, young people, urban planning may just be what you should consider because it is what the country needs. Okay, as I said, it's February 13, 2023. It's a Monday. Let's start by thanking our viewers for joining us. And of course, thank you to Cignal subscribers. Thank you to those who follow us on Facebook, on YouTube, and thank you to PLDT Home Fiber Optic Internet. Okay, our daily starter comes from the former Israel Prime Minister, Golda Meir. I must govern the clock, not be governed by it. Okay? I must govern the clock, not be governed by it. My take on this wise advice from the Prime Minister, may she rest in peace, is that a lot of people don't have a plan, don't have a schedule, don't have things worked out for the day. So many times they chase their tail, they try to figure out what next, what to do, and before you know it, you've run out of time. But it's not just your daily schedule you should think of. Yesterday, I was with a couple of friends and much younger than us, and I said, you just do everything routine, and one morning you wake up, you're old, you're weak, and you can't do anything, and you ask yourself, where did time go? And so please be wise, follow what Golda Meir said, okay? Govern the clock, do not be governed by it. And for those of you who are employers, don't clock watch, please. There are bosses who always pay attention to the clock, not to the output, not to the inspiration, and not to the working condition. If I were you, I would just throw those clocks out and start talking to people. Okay, let's now go to the front page of the Philippine Star for a quick pass-through of the news. And the headline goes, Security Quad with US, Australia, and Japan proposed. Marcos government to review defense triad with US and Japan. According to the vice chairman of the Senate Committee on Foreign Relations, while the president has been talking with officials of Japan regarding our defense cooperation and trade arrangements, there is a possibility that a defense agreement involving the United States, Australia, Japan, and the Philippines will eventually take form. Why? We are not a superpower. We are not a military power like US, Australia, or Japan, but we are strategically located where such a proposal may be beneficial. Of course, those who contradict the idea feel that we are going to be a disaster magnet. But make your choice, but don't sit around waiting. At the top of the Philippine Star, header MVP, Manny V. Pangilinan and Mitsui to invest $600 million in Philippine infrastructure projects. Okay, while joining the president in his trip to Japan recently, Manny V. Pangilinan sat down with officials of Mitsui and they came to an agreement to invest $600 million in the Philippines. Okay, that photo that you see at the upper part of the Philippine Star is a photo of visitors posing for a photo in front of the Mehan Gardens Maynilab display in Manila. Okay? If you are unaware of it, papaalalahanan ko na kayo, tomorrow is Valentine's Day. Okay? So, do not be caught off guard, gentlemen. And para dun sa inyong nakalimot, rush out today. Okay? Okay, now, a bit of concerning news. Pinay and children missing in Turkey. A Filipina and her children have been missing following the devastating earthquake that struck Turkey last Monday, the Philippine Embassy in Ankara said yesterday. The embassy has sought the assistance of search and rescue in Hatay City on the status of a missing Filipino and their children feared to be still under the rubble. Meanwhile, quake death toll tops 28,000. Survivors still being found as of yesterday. Okay, so may pag-asa pa rin po. Another photo at the bottom part, we have Mayor of Quezon City, Joy Belmonte, joining members of Gabriela and other women's rights advocate as they mark the 10th year of 1 billion rising at Quezon Memorial Circle on Saturday. Yan po, the largest international campaign against all forms of violence against women. Parang awan nyo na po, ha? Let us put a stop to violence against women. United Nations claim not enough capital for Philippine education, healthcare, and infrastructure. Okay, the question is, where is all the money going to? Okay, 7 years before the 2030 deadline to meet the Sustainable Development Goals, the United Nations called for accelerated funding to help the Philippines meet the Sustainable Development Goals it has committed to. Okay? So, yun po, pag-aaralan natin yan. Perhaps we can tackle that in a future episode of Agenda. Okay, now, fewer Pinoys taking up nursing. According to this news item, despite the huge demand for healthcare workers abroad, the local recruitment industry yesterday reported a downtrend in the number of Filipinos opting for a nursing degree. It comes as no surprise, ladies and gentlemen, as I pointed out that personally, I have discovered while trying to help a student that one student will cost 500,000 to 1 million to send through college for nursing. Many Filipinos cannot afford that anymore. Hindi po katulad noon, medyo mura pa ang nursing. Okay. Meanwhile, another photo on the front page, a worker prepares a themed room of Victoria Court Hotel in Pasig City on Saturday ahead of Valentine's Day. The hotel, which housed the frontliners and returning overseas Filipino workers during the pandemic lockdowns, is now fully open. Ayan. And Department of Health, celebrate Valentine's Day safely and inexpensively. Okay, so warning lang po yan ng DOH. Aside from, just go to the parks, celebrate it simply, huwag kain ng kain at kung ano-ano ang ginagawa because it can be stressful and it can cause complications to some people. Last but not the least, U.S. blacklists 6 Chinese entities linked to balloons. Okay, hindi po ito yung balloon na binebenta sa simbahan. Okay, these were those balloons, one of which flew across the United States and had to be shot down by a U.S. fighter plane. And apparently there was a second UFO, quote-unquote, na spherical object that they had to shoot down again. So asar na yung mga Amerikano. Okay, let's now go for, are we going for a break or are we going direct to our first to our topic? Okay, tuloy lang po mga kaibigan. Let's now roll out the Betamax to introduce, of course, our guest today, none other than Paulo Alcazaren. Gab, roll out the Betamax.
Paulo Alcazaren is the principal architect of PGAA Creative Design, a multidisciplinary design firm that offers services in environmental planning, urban design, and landscape architecture. A multiple-time recipient of various design awards, Alcazaren obtained his master's degree in urban design from the National University of Singapore.
Okay, Pa, welcome to the program. Welcome back, of course. Good morning to you, my friend.
Morning, Cito. How are you?
I'm doing fine. Excited about your lecture this morning. Alam mo, sinasabi ko lang TV interview, pero actually it's always a free lecture for me. I always learn something.
Yeah. I stopped lecturing 15 years ago, so I used to teach.
Yeah, but hey, you're good at what you do, and that's why we've asked you to come join us today. And the topic really is, can we still resurrect Metro Manila? You are the foremost, if you are one of, if not the foremost respected urban planner in the country. You have accomplishments even abroad. And what say you? Pwede ba? Because most people say, mahal yan, pare, matagal yan, it takes forever, etc. Could you please share your expertise and what you think can be done?
Well, of course, it's never too late, and there is always hope. And on the argument that it will cost more, it will cost even more if we don't do anything to fix the metropolis. And I use the word metropolis in a collective sense because what we're trying to do, and the mayors of the 17 LGUs in Metro Manila are trying to do, is to try to do it within the confines of their jurisdictions. When the problems that beset our metropolis is metropolitan-wide, you cannot stop floods from flowing from from Pasig to Taguig. From Manila to San Juan, you cannot stop crime that way, and the transport problem is what generates traffic throughout the metropolis. So we cannot solve things isolated in the 17 political frameworks, when in fact the metropolis is a physical entity, and that's what we often forget because sorry, maybe we have too many lawyers and not enough urban planners.
Okay, now where would you begin? Because yeah, I asked Gab to send you a copy of my column. And when
Yes.
I was writing my column, I didn't know where to start. You know, it took me an hour just to kind of untangle and find a starting point because the first thing that affects people is parking. The next is traffic and then mobility. And I'm saying this is not about vehicles alone. There must be a starting point. Where would a mayor or the Metro Manila Council, where should they start?
Well, the issue of parking is really focused on those who actually drive cars or use cars, and that's because we don't have a good mass transport system. I mean, I lived in Singapore for 12 years. A lot of us lived overseas in places where you didn't need to own a car. New York, for example, and Central Paris, if you were lucky enough. And that's only possible if you have, or certain cities like Melbourne and Sydney. It's only when you have a good transport system that then your parking problem is really the problem of very few. But having said that, and before we try and fix the transport problem, which really needs a lot of thought and coordinated effort, the parking situation vis-a-vis areas where you do have to park, like say in Capitolio or in Poblacion or Maginhawa and the restaurant enclaves like Morato
Or BF.
or BF. Oh, yeah, or BF. That can only be addressed. You can address it at the site of the problem, but you can also address it in the context of where you put businesses, and that's land use planning. You don't put these things where you haven't provided adequate facilities for parking. In other cities, they call it metropolitan parking buildings. These are government built multi-level parking garages, or you can have ordinances that give incentives to building owners to put in additional capacity in buildings. Local case in point is there was a big parking problem in Makati CBD 20 years ago, and the chief planning officer of Ayala at the time, Art Corpus, and his team looked at how to address this problem. And they made an audit of all of the parking capacities of buildings in the CBD, as well as the capacity of on-street parking, if that were controlled. As you mentioned in your piece, the use of parking meters or parking maids, and that's exactly what happened. They found that the projected requirement for parking could be accommodated by one, enticing building owners to open up to outside parking, or also allowing on-street parking. That's why you have the meter maids, and not the meter maids, but the Masaya and the Makati government use that system. You cannot stay more than a few hours depending on where you are. But everyone, of course, resisted at the start, but eventually now everybody knows how to park in Makati, and there are lots of opportunities because of the mixed-use developments. And that's a good thing about the mixed-use developments. It's a lot of these mixed-use developments by the big players always have good parking capacities, and because a lot of these developments like Makati and BGC are now more pedestrian friendly than it was before.
Yeah.
Makati was retrofitted. The Makati CBD was retrofitted. We were part of that effort. BGC had the advantage of learning the lessons from Makati and implemented a lot of things urban design wise, like wide sidewalks and safe crossings, etc., as well as land use planning that allowed for mixed use and parking behind, like on in High Street in the on the edges are parking. So once you understand that system, you then learn where to park when you get into those districts.
But Paulo, you're talking about a commercial district.
Yes,
Then we already know that this is really all about management.
yes,
But what about villages? Like for instance, you
Yeah.
mentioned my place here in Capitolio. This was originally and supposed to be just residential. Like
Exactly.
many places in Metro Manila are supposed to be residential,
Yeah.
but then the homeowner started leasing them out or renting them out to offices because the offices felt they were cheaper, more affordable than the buildings, commercial buildings that were put up, during the heyday. Now, I know that in other countries, they have rationalized how much you can rent your space out, how many you can rent out to what purpose, etc. And residential have to stay residential. Now, is zoning an impossible dream in Metro Manila, or is it really the solution? Because some people say, "Pare, you have to implement zoning. Residential has to be residential, and commercial has to be commercial." What do urban planners say to that?
Well, people have to understand that Metropolitan Manila and all of the individual cities have grown in the last 3 decades from a situation where you could single-use zone businesses and commercial versus subdivisions, and of course, Makati and its residential subdivisions, where the deed restrictions are very, very, very strictly implemented, you still have that. Not so in other areas where the deed of restrictions have already past its shelf life, and zoning is open to you can apply for rezoning, or spot zoning is very popular in a lot of LGUs. So essentially, it shoots down any efficacy of zoning. But then again, you ask why businesses or residences turn into office space or food and beverage, as in the major streets in Capitolio, or say Maginhawa and Teachers Village, is because the market is there, and there's a push for zoning zoning changes. So spot zoning again, because the city sees the potential of additional income from sales tax and such. So if everything is spot zoning, then zoning is really useless. But zoning in an expanding city that not has accommodated for such expansion, there's nothing you can do. So it goes back to really understanding what the term planning is, which is anticipating future needs and designing for that, designing for infrastructure to support that, because what we're doing is retrofitting places that originally were for residential into office space and mid-rise buildings. In the matter of Capitolio, you now have 10-story buildings, right? So the infrastructure for that in the original subdivision utility design is not for those buildings. It's really for single detached houses. So that's where you have to dig up the roads to accommodate more utility lines, drainage, water, power, everything. So everything is ad hoc. Everything is low hanging fruit, and then you just change. But then the problem with all of this ad hocness of the city is nothing is coordinated. Everything is fair game. You cannot do any transport or mobility planning because your roads are not configured for that. Everything is not configured for these opportunities that rise up because you allowed variances in
Yeah.
zoning. So we really have to step back. But for urban planners like us, we study why things happen this way. A lot of the organic developments of places that have come up stem from the addressing of needs. Say in BF, I forget the name of the main street. The reason it turned commercial is because BF in Parañaque and the surrounding areas didn't have a town center or didn't have a commercial area that could hold this commercial establishments that were close to the residences of those in the subdivisions. So the subdivision developers in the old days did not provide for all of the needs except for just the house and the lot. And that's why you see all the commercial establishment. It was because of the need of the residents to have some place close to buy their grocery and to have their meals. So we as planners, we have to think about really the needs of the people we cater to, and not just the needs of the developer to sell the house and the lot.
Well, generally, what's happened is we respond to the biggest problem or the loudest headache. Now, I suppose you have no choice but to do likewise. If you were presented or invited by the Metro Manila Mayor's Council, how would you speak to them, or what would you tell them? Would you would you start it by saying, well, your biggest problem is, and what would that be? Or how would you go about
Your
it?
biggest problem is you. Your biggest problem is governance. Your biggest problem is 17 LGUs with all different configurations and population sizes and edges that do not make any sense if you're looking at it purely from the perspective of efficient management. Hypothetically, if Metro Manila 900 square kilometers was managed as a private entity, it would not be cut up into the 17 that we now see, because they're all different sizes. Quezon City is huge, San Juan is little. The major transport networks are everything is unevenly distributed exactly because of the framework. So the biggest problem really is governance frameworks versus physical reality. That's a very big picture.
Okay, I've been pushing for a governor of Metro Manila, as a controversial as the idea may be, but I've said, look, New York has a governor, all the other, I think California has a governor, etc. And other places have governors, and Metro Manila cannot persist under this system of having 17 Indians and no chiefs.
Well, that's true. In fact, just in the region, we're the last metropolitan area that is governed as piecemeal jurisdictions. I mean, Singapore is essentially a city-state. Hong Kong, the same thing. Tokyo is governed as a metropolitan area. Even Jakarta, they have something like a MMDA, but strong as Jabotabek. So there is coordination in all of this, except for even Kuala Lumpur, except for Manila. So Manila, because of the 1991 law that devolved central authorities to the local LGUs, all our LGUs are so fiercely independent that they don't even want to take a look at what their neighbor is doing.
Okay, so having said that, what would then be your next option? Okay, gentlemen, we can't We can't remove all of you from office. We can't appoint a governor. So what is the next option?
Well, the next option would be if you don't want to give up your political framework and a lot, and I've tried talking to some of them, and I have been called in along with other urban planners to the MMDA, is if you want to persist with the political framework, then you find a way for better collaboration, or finding a unified strategy through your planning units in each of the 17. Each of the 17 LGUs are required to have a plantilla and a department called the City Planning and Development Office, CPDO, or in the instance of Pateros, a MPDO, Municipal Planning and Development Office, which is manned by law, required to be manned by licensed and registered planners, and have a staff that can support the putting together of a physical framework plan for all these cities and one town. And what can be done is to strengthen the collaboration amongst the planning offices, and possibly also, as the MMDA tried to do a couple of years back in the previous administration, they called us, and to find a group of people who can advise them. And I was there along with Mr. Corpus, and also, in fact, Dinky Einsidel, who used to head the MMDA in the 1970s, and until he was asked to, although he was very good, he was too identified with the previous administration. So although he did offer his services, he was asked to leave, and he spent over a decade working as a planning officer for the UN Habitat.
Who is this again, Paulo?
Dinky Einsidel.
Binky?
Dinky von Einsidel. He's Filipino.
Binky. Okay.
Dinky.
Dinky,
Nathaniel, Nathaniel von Einsidel. And
Yeah.
he's the fellow who put together the team that created the 17, created Metro Manila, and advised that it be governed as a region.
Mhm.
And I collect all of their original studies, and their original studies, even to reframe jurisdictions, still hold water, still make sense. It makes a whole lot of sense. Although now a lot of the original assumptions have changed slightly, because the metropolis had expanded. When you look at their planning maps, you do have to make adjustments because of what happened in the last 40 years. So that's what we could do as a first step or an interim step before finally getting a complete or a whole change in metro governance. I mean, you could do that. Of course, it's almost informal, but it has to be formalized. The avenue would probably be through the MMDA, because they do have a council of mayors, and they do host that get together supposedly regularly. But then it's a matter of aligning all of the 17 comprehensive land use plans. So each of the 17 are required to prepare this basis for their individual local set of ordinances, which is the comprehensive land use plan. It's a 12-step process. Usually takes about a year or so, and it entails identifying what the vision of each city or town is, identifying the stakeholders who could contribute to fashioning that vision.
But are the decision makers even listening? You were referring to that development planning officer by law, etc. Are they there?
They're there. Except that most of them are there and usually controlled by the agenda of the mayor, and a lot of the agendas are political rather than functional.
Okay, what if DIL, and I'm just, hypothetical here, but if a DILG secretary or the president says, okay, because I pointed out in my articles that if BBM wants to boost the economy, he should study how local government confusion messes up with economics and business. Now, if you were consulted by the president himself or by the DILG secretary, and they said, but Paulo, we need radical solutions, because I have to agree, the bus lane. The bus lane was a bizarre solution. I don't know what your reaction to that was at the start, but strangely enough, it seems to work. It seems to have made traffic move, and I kind of wondered, why can't they institute the motorcycle lane? Why can't they institute 2-day volume reduction and just force everybody to take buses? Why can't they put all these tourist buses on that bus lane? Because we keep talking about mass transport. It's not going to happen, and it takes 30 years.
Well, yes, what we have, the bus lanes is a hybrid from the original concept of the BRT, which other countries have tried and been successful at in South America and other places, except that our implementation of it is only partial. And what's lacking is allowing better access for the users of it to the center island. And, so the lanes have been put in, and the way to make it more user friendly is really getting people how to board, how to queue up better, more comfort in the stations. And that entails the radical idea, the radical requirement there is really urban design. It's really allowing and consolidating space from private lots or private properties, and sometimes in government properties, to allow for people to get to the edges to transit from where they're brought in by their tricycles or jeeps onto the center, and vice versa. And you have that in a problem in also interconnectivity between the bus riders and the LRT, MRT riders. It's the what technically we call it the intermodal transfers. So transfer from modes of walking to a station, getting to the station, LRT, MRT, bus, or for limited instances to even the passing ferry. And that's where we fail, because try to get from one mode of transport here in Manila is where you have a 50-50 chance of losing your life by getting run over, or there's no sidewalk. There's not enough space. It's very uncomfortable. It's unsanitary. It's unsafe. But what the government can't do is to allocate enough space. That's why you find all of the elevators to the LRTs. The staircases are so tight. Of course, the one in ADB is the number one number one example I always use, where you only have about 1 foot of sidewalk left for people to pass, because there's not enough space. They could have talked to the ADB to allow to inset a bit. You have to apply the principle of eminent domain, the greater good for the greater number, to allow for infrastructure that includes infrastructure for people transferring from one mode to the other. That's what is if you go to MRT in Hong Kong, MTR in Hong Kong, MRT in Singapore, the Japanese trains, there is space for people to walk on, comfortable, clean, with a lot of convenience, a lot of clean toilets. It's managing the experience of the commuter. So it becomes so comfortable that you leave your car in the garage, because you can get to where you want to go without getting run over, without reeking of dust, without fear of losing your cell phone. These are the things.
Or you don't have to go mountain climbing.
Yes, or you don't have to go mountain climbing in Kamuning and other places.
Or hill ascent training.
Yes, because what government has done is only, or even private companies who run the franchises, is only to look at the trains or the buses and the people who. But it doesn't make any sense. If you make the intermodal transits much better and the situation more comfortable, you will be able to get more people to take the trains and the buses. You manage the trains and the bus. Well, the trains, for example, even without scientific study, you can just tell that they're not efficient, because in other places that have good mass rapid train systems, you only wait a minute or two for the next train versus, 15 minutes, 20 minutes for the trains here. And the buses are timed, so you know when the buses come, and they're adjusted for the capacities during the peak loads. And so our planning is, like I said, again, ad hoc. And when you try to implement it, it's not fully implemented. Kulang sa no. There's no follow through, and it's not thought out well. And that thinking out well also applies. So you now supposedly you get the intermodal thing going. You have proper terminals, comfortable places for you to transfer modes. Then that's where you have to align it with projected land use. We're doing MRT 7, right?
Yeah.
So it's extending the lines. Cavite is extending the lines. What's lacking, if you look at the plans for these things, is the land use planning around the terminals themselves, which should be adapted to cater for the needs of the transit users. That
Okay,
means
let's go for a quick break, Pao. And when
sure.
we return, I'd really like to ask you for, solutions that can be done right now, because it's getting frustrating. I don't want the conversation to end up like a chapter in the Book of Lamentations. So we'll go for a quick
It
break.
can be done. Yeah.
Okay, when we return, we'll listen to the solutions of urban planner Paulo Alcazaren here on Agenda. Welcome back to the program agenda. I'm your host, Cito Beltran, and our mentor for today, teaching us insights, giving us insights into the challenges of urban planning and resurrecting Metro Manila from the dead, is none other than Paulo Alcazaren. Paulo, give me something to cheer up my
It's
morning.
good you said it's good you said mentor, not mental. Because some to a lot of people, all of these are crazy ideas, but they're really not crazy. It's just common sense. Except that common sense is not common in Philippines, and especially not Metro Manila.
Well, yeah, but you shared you've been sharing videos on your Facebook page regarding places in abroad that used to be all cars, used to be all roads, didn't consider the pedestrians, and then they've shifted and they've slowly given more and more space to pedestrians until they eventually became, one lane roads and three lanes for pedestrians. And I've seen this in my wife's country, in the Netherlands, where in the middle of town, as tiny as the streets are, they have systems where you can bring small cars, you can bring vehicles for the handicapped, and delivery services are only allowed to enter the zone on certain hours, etc.
Yeah.
So there are solutions.
There are solutions. Yes,
And
there are
bicycle lanes all over the country. You can go all over the Netherlands and Holland on a bicycle. Now, what about here? What can we do that?
Yeah, you can. Well, the shared street or Woonerf concept can be done here, but you have to have baby steps. And one of the things is eliminating the resistance of business owners to shut down the streets. And we, well, not we, but a group of like-minded people did an experiment here in front of UANP, is to shut Pearl Drive. And the restaurant owners were apprehensive that it would cut down by patronage, no? But when they did it during weekends, they actually increased the patronage because people found the places comfortable to walk in. A lot of people came to walk. There was pop-ups, but the restaurants themselves, there was an uptick in patronage because people came. And that happened in Europe when Jan Geller, the famous urban planner, suggested this for pedestrianized streets. The patronage of these shops actually increased. So you had a situation where the business owners themselves wanted the city to shut down or do shared streets so you could entice and provide better pedestrian environments. And that can be done. So it has been proven. It's just the thinking that you have to provide parking in front of your establishment. And when you look at it, that's one of the big problems. For a restaurant and you have a frontage of, say, 7 meters, how many cars can you park in front? That's only 3 cars at the most. Right?
Mhm.
That's only
Correct.
That's only 6 diners or one or 2 tables. If your restaurant has so many tables, that doesn't make any sense. So when you think about it, if you plan right and you provide for parking in terms of parking for districts instead of just parking per street per establishment, then you can be more efficient. You can provide more in terms of the public realm. That means sidewalks and with no curb cuts. The number one thing that we can start to enforce is the percentage of your frontage that you can allow cars to come up to. That's a curb cut. If you have a curb and you cut it so the wheels can go up, that's called a curb cut. But we abuse it here by allowing any and all establishments to have 100% curb cuts. So what does that do? It then and then they abuse the inset for the cars to come in. So even though you're supposed to maintain 2 meter or so sidewalk, the tails of all of the cars bump out because of the need for the doors to open at the other end. So then what happens is that you lose all of the sidewalk completely, as in Pearl Drive, and all of the students and faculty of UANP and all of the establishment have to walk in the street, and there have been numerous accidents, and this is why our streets are unsafe. So the trade-off of losing just 3 cars but getting more patronage, you do the math. You don't need those curb cuts. You don't need those curb cuts. You just have to plan district wise, and that's where we fail, is to take a look at the medium picture, not even the very big picture, and you can solve things that way.
Have you heard of any local government unit, city or municipality in Metro Manila that has actually done an audit, like you were talking about that Corpus did in the Makati business in the Makati Commercial Center?
No, not any of the LGUs, because you can't talk to these people.
So none of them have audited, vacant lots that can be leased out or converted into parking areas
wait,
for
hold
people.
on. I correct myself. Quezon City was looking at that solution for Marato, and they have, I believe, identified a number of lots where they're planning to put multi-level municipal car parks.
Mhm.
I think that's one situation, but I don't know anyone else. I mean, when we were doing Pasig, the Pasig Poblacion, there was opportunity for an underground parking behind what used to be the McDonald's, and that was built. So that was in the previous administration, but it was just a small facility. What we need is really to look at larger facilities if you want to provide municipal parking. And there are even amongst urban planners, that's a debate whether to really provide that or to just go the other route and make it more accessible, provide for more pedestrians, and then people would just leave their cars, and you don't need the parking. So in a lot of Europe, where they've switched to car-centric, back to pedestrian and bikes, the municipal car parks are now municipal bicycle parks. So there's more requirement for bicycle parking, which is more efficient, for more vehicles, more per population, more capacity than a car park, which is 2.5 by 5.5 meters for one car, which usually only has 1 or 2 passengers. So you are more efficient when you switch to bicycles and pedestrians, and retrofitting or planning for a pedestrian and cycle-friendly a city or districts in the city. It's not to say that you abandon cars forever. You still need them, but you just have to make a rational plan to accommodate them where they can be accommodated, and to make the rest of the city and the districts walkable, bikeable, or transit connected.
This urban planning cover rents, rent rates, etc. I'm asking not for rent control, but for rationale, because before COVID, before the pandemic, I remember there was a noticeable migration from all of these big buildings, commercial buildings along EDSA and or Makati, etc. They started migrating to residential areas because the rents just got so steep that people said, we're out of here, our commissaries were bringing into the villages, etc. Now, in terms of urban planning, is there a philosophy, a study, or a process where you need to include controlling the rentals for commercial building so that they don't go to residential area, etc.? Because if you remember, Paulo, about two, three decades back, when all of the foreigners started coming to the Philippines, they essentially boxed out a lot of the middle class from rental homes as well.
Yes, rent control is part of the planning regimen, but that has to be tied up with land use planning. And I have to be honest in that we urban planners nowadays, coming out of COVID, have to study how things have changed. It's really very interesting from a planning perspective to see how people have adapted, and will probably go into a hybrid situation. We can never go back to pre-pandemic. Definitely, patterns of use and patterns of use and patterns of circulation where people go during the day. Like my office only comes to face once or twice a week, and the rest of the time we work from home. And we have adjusted times so that we've allowed people to come in at 10 and leave at 3. It's performance based, so that gives them a bit more comfort. They don't have to fight with the rest of the city coming in and out of the city. So there are a lot of, and if you do a study now of rentals and who rents where, especially in the offices, there's a huge change. Even residential wise, although I was just with a friend at Katipunan, and she and her partner were telling me in front of Ateneo that during COVID, all of a sudden, all of the students disappeared, right? Because they're and so the people who came in to lease these spaces are now of a different, not students, but people working. So these are the nomads, the creatives, the writers, the designers. So there's a huge change in the complexion of people who stay in the condos. Of course, now with schools coming back, that may flip again, but it's led to situations where the people who are building these condos also realize that there's a new demographic they can address, and these are the creatives, and they don't need to be anywhere in particular, so long as you have convenience nearby, which you have in the school districts around Ateneo or UST or LaSalle. So for us planners, we're still studying it. Give us time to figure things out, but the opportunity to apply the lessons that we're trying to get out of this, that is where we fall short. We don't have the opportunity because we don't have the ear of a lot of the mayors and the powers that be. You have a Department of Human Settlements and Urban Development that is still trying to find its legs. And so it takes a while. I mean, I know a lot of them. They are well intentioned, and they are a lot of them are current in the thinking. But it needs to be a sustained effort to study and learn the lessons from the past pre-pandemic, and find out what happened during the pandemic, so we can plot strategies, as you mentioned, where we can offer solutions to anyone who's willing to listen.
Okay, well, that's a good way of ending the program. It's hopeful, and I do pray that Metro Manila mayors really pay attention, because ultimately, if it doesn't change, then they will start being called out by the media because they leave us no choice. It's going to be tao-tao, personal na, because everyone is affected, and I do hope we can all cooperate. Well, Paulo, thank you very much for your inputs, for mentoring us this morning, and we remain hopeful that you will gain favor from them, and God will bless your work. Thank you very much, Paulo.
Thank you, Cito. Till next time.
Okay, soon I hope. Okay, that's Paulo Alcazaren, and there you go. There's so much to be done. Let's just all pray, and I sincerely ask all of you, let's all pray that people like President Bongbong Marcos, Secretary Benhar Abalos would all decide once and for all, let's sit down, because this can be good for the economy. When we plan our urban settings, our environment, it will be good for business and good for Filipinos. Okay, let's now go to our closing exhortation for this morning. And we go, pray for breakthroughs, for salvation, reconciliation, healing, provision, and direction. Pray that in 2023 you would have faith to see God do the impossible in your life, in your family and community, in your church, nation, and the world. God bless all of you. I'm Cito Beltran, thanking you for joining us. Please keep it here on One News.